afternoon. My name is Scott Richter. I'm a director at large for the MTA. I want to welcome you to the 2016 Symposium. This afternoon I have the pleasure of interviewing Dave Walton. Dave is the co-founder and partner of StatisTrade, and we're going to discuss what StatisTrade does for family offices, hedge funds, and how he looks at systems development and measuring system effectiveness. So Dave, welcome.
Thanks
for
you.
being here
It's
today.
good to be here.
Tell me a little bit about what you do for hedge funds, family offices that have systematic trading programs, and give us a couple of bullet points on
Sure.
how that
So
works.
we effectively allow them to outsource part of their due diligence process in the early stages of trading system development.
Okay.
So we dig deep using some advanced statistical techniques to really figure out, answer a lot of questions that portfolio managers, RAs, hedge funds may have about their performance going forward.
Or let them know about things they don't know about their systems.
Yes, that's a good point. Absolutely. That's actually probably what surprises people the most is what they don't know about their trading systems.
So you're a computer engineer, computer
Yeah.
scientist. How did you get into the world of quantitative analysis, systems evaluation?
Well, good question. So let me talk a little bit about my background as a computer engineer, computer scientist. So I spent a lot of years doing validation, you can say quality control, for a large computer hardware manufacturer. So I learned a lot of things in my tenure there. And at some point I was fascinated by markets, so I went and got my MBA in finance, started to get into trading, and realized that I could apply some of the stuff I had learned in my engineering career
Very
to
nice.
trading. And a little bit after that, I hooked up with an actuary, a good friend of mine. We co-manage a fund as well. And the initial things that I was doing as part of trading system validation, he looked at it as an actuary and said, hey, what you're doing here is very similar to what we do as actuaries. We call it stochastic modeling. I didn't have a name for it, but
Okay.
that's effectively how I got started on it.
Interesting. Okay, so two numbers guys come together
Yeah.
and create this firm that can help investment firms who do systematic trading get a better handle on their systems.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about what you see. What makes a good system, for example? Give us a couple of nuggets there.
Mm-hmm.
And what failures do people have when they're developing systems? Or
Okay.
what fallacies do they have about their systems
Sure.
that could hurt them in the end?
Sure. So I guess what makes a good system is more simple ideas that are behind there's a strong basis behind them.
Conceptually.
Yes, conceptually.
Okay.
Those tend to be the strongest performers.
As opposed to just fishing for multitudes of indicators that seem to have some
Right.
type of predictability, but may not. It may be spurious.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Or, a lot of people look at individual indicators. They'll put some charts up on a wall and point some things out. But when you put it together into a trading system where you're combining maybe multiple indicators with entries, exits, and then money management overlaid on top of it, what we find is that the interaction between all those elements of the system can actually be a much greater aspect of the system performance than that initial indicator that they maybe were looking at.
So there's kind of a multiplier effect? If you
Yeah,
will, or a
multiplier
magnification?
interaction,
Okay.
and it's not always positive.
Right.
That's a big part of what we see. So there's a lot of biases that go into trading system development, especially if you just, like you said, throw a bunch of things on the wall and see what sticks. Let the computer
Try
figure
to
it out for you.
optimize it, over-optimize it?
Yeah. So data mining bias, which David Walton, who's a CMT, he wrote a book about that. That's a big thing that a big trap that a lot of people fall into. And then there's a lot of other biases as well that, depending on the type of system that people are developing, that they can fall into as well.
Okay. So if somebody wants to, if a firm, a hedge fund, a family office wants to engage you, what does that typically take, and how long does the analysis usually run as you're kind of working this thing through with a particular set of principles?
Yeah, it's a good question. It tends to be very custom. It depends on exactly what they're wanting to do. I'll give you the extremes. So we may have a potential client that has a single trading system. Maybe they're a little nervous about how it's performing based on their actual experience, or they haven't implemented it yet and they just want to get a third party to take a look at it and give them some more confidence. So for something like that, we're talking a matter of weeks once we, the various legal reviews of contracts and whatnot we go through. But
Sure.
On the other end of the spectrum, depending on how big we're talking, there may be systems of systems where you're combining multiple systems to an overall portfolio. That can take a much longer, months or be ongoing.
What would you suggest, for our viewers as far as doing their own due diligence to get a better grounding in system stability, system integrity, basically putting together a good system? Where should people think about, digging out some research and getting smarter on this whole thing?
Yeah, good question. So I mentioned David Aronson. He's got a
David's
good
book?
resource.
Right.
Yep, that's a good place to start for someone who maybe is on the earlier phase of getting started. I think so Perry Kaufman actually has some
Sure.
good stuff in his Bible.
Right, and Perry's
He
a big
talks-
supporter of the MTA.
Yeah, he talks a lot about some good techniques there as well. From there, they both quote sources of research, so people can dig in a little further into research that they talk about. That would be what I would recommend. But don't underestimate what it takes, and it's also it tends to be difficult for people that don't have a quant background or are maybe afraid to write some code. It may be a little daunting, but I would say it's worth it to go down the rabbit hole.
Okay. All right, well, I want to thank you today for your time and for your advice, your insights. And if you haven't watched any of the other videos related to the 2016 Symposium, please do. There are several of them. And once again, we want to say thanks.
Thank you.